Okay, so did you know that Fight Club has a massive clue about the twist in the middle of the movie? After leaving the club, a car pulls up and then the driver gets out and says,
"Don't worry, Mr. Durden. Airport parking, long term."
After you, Mr. Durden.
The driver looks directly at the narrator and yet still calls him Mr. Durden. As we know, the narrator is in fact Tyler, so it hints at the movie's big reveal. Due to the bruises on the driver's face, it's also likely the pair have met before, so pretty much spells out he knows who he is, and it's such a great way to basically show us the twist. Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and in this video we're breaking down the movie we don't talk about. Fight Club is an absolute classic, and it's definitely a film that gets better over time. Though its style and twist have often been copied, I don't think anyone has ever reached this level. This was Fincher firing on all cylinders, and it still stands as one of his best. But why does it work so well, and why is it still relevant all these decades later? Well, throughout this video, that's what we'll be going through, and we'll discuss all the hidden details, things you might have missed, and also the true meaning. It's a movie I've broken down before, but it's one I've always wanted to go back to. So we're going to be breaking the first two rules and talking about Fight Club. So with that out of the way, thank you for clicking this. Now let's get into Fight Club.
You do not talk about Fight Club.
Now at its core, Fight Club's about tearing down corporate and commercial structures. This is seen right from the off when you first put in the Blu-ray. Starting up the disc will bring up the menu for Never Been Kissed, which stays on screen for about 10 seconds. Drew Barrymore gets a further reference in the film as we see her on the cover of Movie Line. First time I put this in, it completely got me, and I thought the company had burned the wrong disc. However, this soon glitches out and gives us inside the narrator's apartment. This is where he lists the things that he owns, and it begins the idea that he wants to destroy them. So having this fun, easy popcorn flick kickstart the menu is a great way to tie into its themes. It's also brilliantly playing into the idea you aren't allowed to talk about Fight Club. If you have the disc and then press play, you'll get a copyright disclaimer. Most people don't bother to read them, and they of course appear on a lot of releases. However, pausing it here reveals a message from Tyler. He pretty much berates the viewer for wasting their life reading pointless stuff like this. It says, just by spending seconds doing this, we're inching quicker towards death and not really making the most of our existence. Which, welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. After this, we then hit the title sequence. In the introduction there, we can hear a classical piece which is then cut out to play the theme of the movie. This again highlights the tearing down of the foundations of a classical message in order to push a more contemporary one. At this point, we then cut to the narrator, with this taking place at the end of the film. He then explains the events that led to this point in which we learn about Tyler. The focus then kind of switches to that, and we never actually learn the narrator's name. However, people have assumed it was Jack because of these lines.
I am Jack's raging bile duct.
I am Jack's complete lack of surprise.
These appear throughout the movie, however, this is actually the narrator calling back to a paper he found in the house.
I am Jack's medulla oblongata. Without me, Jack could not regulate his heart rate, blood pressure, or breathing.
Due to the sequel stories though, we know he's called Sebastian. Written by Chuck Palahniuk, Fight Club 2 was released in 2015. Fight Club 3 dropped 3 years after that, and I hope we'll get some sequel films too. However, for this breakdown, I will solely be focused on the movie, though I might address him as Sebastian from time to time. Being called the narrator though has its own reasons which help aid the character. This guy's so unremarkable that it's almost like he doesn't even deserve a name. Either way, Chuck came up with the concept for the book after being beaten up on a camping trip. Upon returning to work, he realized nobody acknowledged it. Instead, they just asked surface level questions, with him saying it was stuff like, "How was your weekend?" "Not too bad. I got smashed like the like button." According to Chuck though, he realized they didn't ask what had happened upon seeing him because that would be a more personal question. He said they simply didn't care enough, which also fascinated him. Constructing the theory of societal blocking, he thought people's interactions were often pretty basic. We were all sticking to these norms and going through the motions of how we thought that people acted. With this in mind, he crafted the work, though he has said the film improved his story. When crafting it, he also didn't have the twist in mind at first. Chuck's admitted that it was only when he was 2/3 of the way through that the dual identity idea struck him. Notice noticing there was very little differences between the two, he tied things up by making them the same. With an adaptation though, you obviously have the benefit of hindsight. Fincher laid a lot of clues throughout, and this can be seen right from the off. The title sequence itself takes place in the narrator's brain, which suggests everything's going down here. Though the events of the film are real per se, the opening conversation is happening in his mind. Fincher really worked on his title sequences, which is something we saw in Seven. Designed to show his fear, impulse and action, it's supposed to show why he created Tyler in the first place. However, Fincher didn't have it easy with the studio. Thinking it was too elaborate, he had to budget it himself away from the film. They said if they like it, they'd then fund it, and after seeing the rough cut, they went ahead and let him do it. According to IMDb trivia, the brain was mapped through renderings by medical illustrator Catherine Jones, with it then being worked on by Digital Domain. The narrator then says the opening line of the movie.
People are always asking me if I know Tyler Durden.
This is a great little meta joke, as they're of course one and the same. The reveal only comes at the end of the movie though, so this line, it makes the audience curious. The narrator's also on his knees with Tyler's gun in his mouth. You can read into the subtext there, but it shows who's really in control. Throughout the film, the narrator's a passive character that doesn't really have any agency. It's Tyler who does just about everything, but that all changes at the end. That builds off the back of this moment in the opening, so it's a great way to kickstart the movie. The narrator then explains the layout of the explosives and ends it by saying,
I know this because Tyler knows this.
Which is obviously because they share a brain. Now if you're paying attention, you'll also catch Tyler sliced into the movie. This gives away that he's not really there and is merely emerging in Sebastian's mind. In the end, he materializes more, but we have these little clips which we've slowed down for the video. Watching in the cinema where you can't rewind stuff, I can imagine that people didn't catch these. We're going to be getting into all the other clues in just a bit, but firstly, just a quick word from our sponsors. A huge shout out to our partners at Arrow Video, who sell a ton of 4K Blu-rays on some really classic titles. They've got movies like The Great Escape, Silence of the Lambs, Candyman, RoboCop, and a lot more. For 10% off, click my link in the description and use the code HEAVYSPOILERS. That's 10% off in my link in the description with the code HEAVYSPOILERS. You deserve it, mate. Treat yourself. Now Fincher of course came from commercials, and this is how he established his career. Over the years he gained a wealth of knowledge with adverts and deconstructed this in the movie. He's satirizing and subverting everything to spin it on its head. Thinking back to the 90s, Pitt was also one of the most famous men on earth. Men wanted to be him and women wanted to be with him, and it's a big altering of expectations. Similar to this, the idea of corporations now being part of every aspect of society is smartly put into the movie. Starbucks cups appear constantly throughout the film, and they pop up at several major points.
Planet Starbucks.
Though you might initially think it's just some set dressing, the sheer amount of them goes far beyond that. It's believed this highlights how corporations infiltrate our lives and then just become part of the status quo. They're in every facet of existence, but never truly at the forefront. Instead, they operate in the background and are part of the pieces that keep us enslaved. Although Starbucks didn't mind their cups being used in the movie, they did retract it from the destruction of a coffee shop. That was originally supposed to be a Starbucks, but the globe ends up hitting the fictional Gratifico coffee. Gratifico. Either way, Fight Club very much carries the idea that we must rebel against the system, which was an idea shared by The Matrix. Just like The Matrix, corporate control surrounds our characters, even if they're completely unaware of it. However, Fight Club is an affront to this, at least initially. Most of the members lose their individuality, and Tyler even ends up franchising. So Fight Club itself becomes like the corporations it's trying to destroy. This somewhat reflects the narrator's father, who Sebastian theorized had families all over the country.
Setting up franchises.
This standing up to authority initially seems like rebellion, but in the end, it's just forming new structures. However, in order to rebel, they need to revolt, and this idea of breaking rules is well seen in the rules. In the film, we learn that the first two rules of Fight Club are that you don't talk about Fight Club. These two are exactly the same, much like how our two main characters are. Not only do they not really talk, but they're also shrouded in secrecy. However, in order for Fight Club to grow, it requires that people break the rules. Thus, its entire growth structure is based around people doing this. It gets them used to breaking the rules and also seeing how this can help one to grow. Now, one rule that does get broken that we know for definite revolves around Meatloaf's Bob. We're told that you're not allowed to wear a shirt, but he actually had to don one for practical reasons. The actor was made to wear a fat suit in order to give him realistic titties. So the t-shirt covered this up and helped to mask the seams and girdle. However, the creative team were a bit worried about Fox pushing back on the nipples. So they built two fat suits, one with and one without out. All scenes were filmed twice, but in the end they obviously kept the one with the Batman and Robin suit. After the opening, we then transition to Sebastian being shoved to Bob's nipples. We then cut to a sign about remaining men together, and this entire film deals with men. We learn that Bob used to be a bodybuilder, which is typically thought of as being manly and strong. However, he had an issue with the steroids and developed testicular cancer, and since having his balls removed, he's grown boobs. Thus, he's now seen as being less than a man. The movie itself tackles the idea of old masculinity, such as savage men that want to fight one another, taking back the more sensitive person that they've been told to be. This is shown through Bob, who has breasts, and the hugging scene, which is a big moment for the narrator. Tyler is very much about embracing one's male primal side, but whether this is the right path to take or not depends on your perception of society and the world around us. Whilst Tyler wants people to break free of the trappings of society, he also ends up creating Project Mayhem. This is a group of men with no individual identity. Though they're breaking free from the order of society, they all just end up following orders. We even learn that the punishment for exposing this is castration, and this actually has a lot of depth to it. This shows that Tyler wants men who don't fall in line to fall in line or become less than men. It brings things full circle from the testicular cancer meeting where we learn Bob's lost his balls. Now he's part of a group that threatened to take them from other men, and I feel like the narrator's subconscious picked this out as a punishment because he knew how cruel it was. Bob even indulges in this even though he knows how destructive it can be.
That rum tough sack, Bob.
Man, these balls are ice cold.
Everyone has to fall in line though, and they've become part of a cult. This is most notably seen in Bob's death when the group all chant in unison.
His name is Robert Paulson. His name is Robert Paulson.
This is over with!
His name is Robert Paulson.
However, the fact that the narrator ascends beyond this and decides to reject these ideas by killing Tyler shows that he no longer embraces these ideologies. He has gone on to become a better man in destroying the dark side of himself. Anyway, the story then jerks about again, and we hear about how the narrator can't sleep. The story is told to us frantically and almost like the ramblings of a madman. Saying he couldn't sleep, that's when we cut to the Starbucks shot, and I did wonder if they were linked. Copy, of course, keeps you awake, and if everyone's drinking it like that, then you're probably going to be up all night watching 2-hour breakdowns of Return of the King on heavy spoilers and also hitting the thumbs up, which I know you did.
Good boy.
We then get a shot as we pull out the trash can and can see several corporate products like Krispy Kreme. What you might not know though is that this shot was actually the most complex in the entire movie. The single frame of this took 8 hours to render and was one of the first shots that they worked on. It almost didn't make the cut either, and they managed to get it in the movie just before it was scheduled to be sent out. Because every second took so long to render, it was like, come on man, we need it before we put the movie out. We then get the IKEA catalogue, which I think has a specific meaning to it. All of the items are cheap and disposable, and on the whole, they're completely mass produced. So everything becomes part of the zeitgeist and thus individuality's lost. The narrator also finds kinship with these objects even though they don't really mean anything. So it's sort of like how he gets an attachment to Tyler, and in the end, both are as hollow as each other. Which I say as I sit in front of 2 IKEA bookcases. Sell out! We then have him go to the doctors and get another clue about the characters.
If I wake up in strange places, I have no idea how I got
He'll
there.
later become Tyler in these blackouts, and it lays the groundwork for his condition. Told he can't die from insomnia, he's then told to go visit the support groups. Putting on a name badge, we can see this says Cornelius. This is a nod to the character from the Planet of the Apes. The narrator uses fictional names at all the groups, with him calling himself Rupert and later on Travis. The first of these is a nod to Robert De Niro's character in The King of Comedy, with the latter being a nod to his character in Taxi Driver. Letting go, he embraces the group and then finally sleeps. The groups themselves include a number of things, but we also see a card asking if he's schizophrenic. Even today, people still use that term when describing split personality, so again, it's another clue, and going back then, yeah, it just makes sense they would have used that term instead. Hallucinating being in an ice cave with a penguin, we can see as his cold breath comes out. This was actually the asset used in Titanic when Leo was holding onto the raft, which could have fit 2 people. Maybe he was a hallucination that Rose needed to lead her out of her life. Everything's a Fight Club. Either way, it's at this point that Mahler enters. Hating her for being someone he sees for faking conditions to go to these groups, it's also playing on the self-hate he develops with Tyler. Now, Helena Bonham Carter actually told the makeup artist to apply her makeup with the left hand because she didn't want it to seem like she cared for her appearance.
She doesn't look bad. I think the further away you are, the better.
She based her on an old Judy Garland, and Fincher would even call her Judy on set. The narrator is very much angered by this woman invading a space he thinks should belong to men. Thus, you could see his invention of Tyler as a way to handle being emasculated. Fight Club is a man-only club, and thus its invention could be seen as being due to how he perceives Marla here. Marla's phone number is also 555-0134, which also just happens to be Teddy's in Memento. Anyway, the Now Playing podcast did a brilliant analysis of the film, and they brought up what they think's happening. They talked about how in the book they discuss how she has a thing for items people once loved and then tossed away. For example, she buys a wedding dress from a thrift store and also picks up Christmas trees in January. In the film, it's a bridesmaid's dress, which she compares to how condoms are used passionately and then tossed away. Now this could be why she's attracted to Sebastian, and in the book we learn about his family. His dad ended up leaving when he was young, and his mother really fell apart.
I don't know my dad. I mean, I know him, but he left when I was like 6 years old.
Something they don't hammer home in the film though is that Tyler and Marla represent his parents. The narrator's waiting for this strong masculine figure to come along and pull him out of his life. Marla's also a bit of a wreck, and potentially she's also been thrown away as well. I could definitely see it where we have her once being loved and then thrown out, so she feels a kinship with those objects. Agreeing to share the groups, we then watch as they walk into a laundromat. I love how Marla steals jeans from the machines and then goes and sells them at a thrift store. Now we also learn about what Sebastian does for a living. Sebastian's part of the corporate world and he works in a recall assessment for a car manufacturer. What's scary is that this is a real position and people are tasked with weighing up all the pros and cons of safety. You have companies trying to figure out whether the price of a recall is gonna cost more than a wrongful death lawsuit. Sebastian's the one who works this out, and in a way he has power over life and death. However, he's someone who's always in the background and never really noticed or acknowledged. Growing up, the character was a bit of a rebel, which is something I think we all did at one point in our teens. However, he's now sunken in the wage slave corporate catalog lifestyle and has become the very thing that he would have rebelled against when he was younger. So Tyler is a representation of that, which is seen right from his introduction.
Could you wake up as a different person?
We see this as he rides past Tyler, so he's symbolizing what the figure represents. Talking about hotels and travel, we then get a welcome video. If you pause this frame and look closely to the right, you'll see Pitt playing one of the staff. Later on, we see this job in action, and it's possible that he met this guy or saw the video out on his travels. Meeting him on an airplane, we can see they're sat right at the exit door. This is given attention in the film as they talk about the safety of air travel. However, the exit is really just a representation of Tyler. He's giving him the chance to exit his life, and he's the one who pulls him out of it. This comes after he's just had a dream in which the plane was about to crash. Symbolically, this could highlight his death, and then he reawakens as a new person. It's an idea of rebirth, and Tyler rushes in a new chapter in his life. In the book, the narrator takes a vacation and then falls asleep on the beach. Waking up to find it's a nudist one, he finds Tyler standing above him. I think it just works better here with the frantic nature, and it's a real tonal shift in the movie. Now, what I love about this is that though there's nihilism throughout the film, there's also dark humor. The narrator jokes about life insurance paying out more if you die on a business trip, but obviously he won't be there to spend the money. They do horrible things throughout the film, but what stops it feeling depressing is the movie's sense of humor. Through the film, you might also notice Tyler's clothes, which at points are often pretty wild. This was done to reflect Marla, with them all coming from a thrift store. Thematically, this also plays into the idea that he doesn't like labels. As I mentioned, we learn that Tyler's part of his insomnia, which is played up in multiple ways. For example, the discussion of film reels being swapped also works as a metaphor for Tyler taking over. We learn that films are shown on two reels and the projectionist has to swap between them manually. This is cued by a cigarette burn, and drop a comment if you're old enough to remember them, because I sure do. The projectionist then triggers the second reel, and like Tyler, this is the one who takes over. So when the narrator goes to sleep, it's Tyler who works through the night. This is why later when the twist is revealed, we have it played out like a film reel. It's also important to bear in mind that Chuck coined the phrase cigarette burn, and it wasn't used professionally before this film. Fincher also took his experience from real life as he worked as a projectionist in his youth. Beyond that though, Tyler can also be seen throughout wearing blue blocker glasses. These are more frequent these days as people look at mobiles and screens a lot more. Back then, they were used mainly for insomniacs and they helped the brain to wind down. The narrator also gives a hint that they're one and the same as he points out they have the same briefcase.
We have the exact same briefcase.
Opening it up, we get a split-second shot that shows his bars of soap. In the center, we have the pink ones that we use for the logo. As we later learn, Tyler gets ingredients from liposuction clinics and literally sells people's fat back to them. Next to it is a sign for infectious human waste, which is also something Marla refers to herself as.
She's infectious human waste!
So you could see he maybe coined it from this. Looking at the label, we can also see this says Paper Street Soap. In real life, a paper street's a patch of land that's often been bought by a developer. This is then filed with the council so it can show up on maps. However, the Paper Street term comes from the fact the developer wouldn't build on it. So you'd have the street exist on paper, but it wouldn't be there in real life. He also passes over his business card, which we get a better look at later. This has two figures facing each other, which hints at the duality of the characters. Though the narrator's thumb hides the end of the zip card, we can see that it's 19808. It's possible that this was influenced by Sebastian's boss, as we get his business card later in the movie. The zip code there is 198090, so maybe he pulled it from that. At the bottom, we can also see his email addresses for Telenex, and we can see the payphones also made by Telenex as well. As the narrator plays with the card in his hand later on, we can also see the number written on the back, which is 555-0178. This is actually the narrator's phone number at his apartment, showing he was calling himself. Held up at the airport, you might notice as Tyler speeds off in a car that a guy runs up behind it because Tyler clearly stole it. In hindsight, we know this is so he could rush to the apartment and then blow it up before Sebastian arrives. This is kind of like, I don't know, like the one thing that actually makes you wonder what scene actually happened and whether he was even held up at the airport. He does end up leaving the desk though, and then staring out as the car gets stolen. So he probably doesn't return back to the desk and then just carries on as Tyler. Either way, the apartment building being blown up is something Tyler hinted towards doing. In the prior scene, Tyler revealed that he knew how to build explosives.
One can make all kinds of explosives using simple household items.
In the film, his character was going to talk about an actual recipe, which is something that he does in the book. However, the studio worried it could cause danger to the public, so instead, he just says fictional ones. Now, though the explosion was initially said to be a pilot light, in retrospect we learn it was Tyler.
Why do you think I blew up your condo?
As the narrator gets a taxi home, you might also notice the sign for Pearson Towers. The slogan is a place to be somebody, with this playing off the themes of identity. The building itself was picked because it resembled a filing cabinet, and thus it further taps into the corporate themes. Sebastian also says to the officer,
Me, that condo was my life.
Thus, he self-sabotaged and destroyed his life so he can build himself up as something new. As they say, the things you own end up owning you, and this is the only way Tyler can set him free.
Things you own end up owning you.
I've always taken that saying as being like, you buy things, you become attached to them, and then they become a burden. If you're paying things off, have a condo you're living in, it can limit you in a lot of ways. I'm stuck in Newcastle, whereas I could just burn down my house and come hang out with you, mate. Let's go, baby! Not to be like, kids today have no respect as well, but over the last 30 years, we've seen a massive shift in culture. These days, we're all married to our phones and spend all our days on social media liking products, so we can't even see how the corporate world surrounds us. It's now just in everything that we do. We also get further clues as a split in the personality, as there's a yin and yang table in the rubble. This helps to showcase a duality and is a really subtle part of the set dressing. It also builds off this line from earlier in the movie.
If I saw something clever, like a little coffee table in the shape of a yin-yang, I had to have it.
As we get a tour of his room, we can also see the coffee table there. Tyler destroying this is also a culmination of Fincher's feelings from LA. He said when he first moved there, his home looked exactly like this. He decided to model the movie one on that because he said he always wanted to blow it up. The narrator then calls Tyler and asks for a place to stay.
Hello?
Yeah, you suck.
This is weird though, and it's almost played like Tyler was waiting for the call. If you look closely at the phone, you'll also see a neat little clue. This says how the booth doesn't receive incoming calls, and thus we know that this never really happened. Going to the bar, I also noticed another clue that I don't think's ever been spotted. We open the scene with Tyler and a pint glass, which he then puts on the table. This sits at the bottom of the frame, and we watch as he fills it up. However, this then disappears in the next cut, which you might think's a continuity error. However, as this happens, the narrator takes a drink from his own glass, which he then puts back on the table. Tyler, meanwhile, pours into nothing now, even though the glass was just there a few seconds ago. Staring at the glass, you can see there's only ever one glass on the table. Going outside, I love how Tyler just takes a coin from the bottom of the phone. I did wonder if the call from before also did the same thing, as technically that call didn't go anywhere. So maybe it could be playing off that, but it just kind of shows what kind of guy he is.
What kind of guy that you are?
Outside, Tyler asks to be punched in the face, and we learn a little about him. Seeing he slices frames of a guy's chunk into a family film, this is a little nod to Persona. At the beginning of the film, there's some flash frames shown, including one that's got a dick. This is then later played upon in the movie, and at the end, they insert a single frame of one right after the explosion, which we can't show for obvious reasons, but you'll see it if you watch the film. The pair then end up fighting, and we get some more clues about Tyler. The two share a beer, with there only being one needed for the both of them. Tyler's also squatting at a rundown house, and it's being completely abandoned. In hindsight, the narrator clearly came across this in his madness and then decided to live there. We then go to the second fight. If you look at the crowd, you'll notice they only look at the narrator. On the third fight, a guy steps forward and then volunteers himself. Standing behind him, you might notice the guy with the long hair and beard, and we later learn this is Irvin, who manages the bar.
Come on, people, you gotta go home.
At his work, the narrator also has difficulty hearing things.
What?
Which could be due to this.
Hit me in the ear.
This might explain his deafness and why he can't hear after the fight. This idea is further enforced later in the movie when we see him rubbing near his ear during the meeting. That night, the pair then go to the bar, and you might notice that the bouncer only nods and acknowledges the narrator. Watching a fight unfold, we see a guy winning. This is who we see at Sebastian's job the next day, and he cuts a figure through all the Starbucks cups and photocopiers. Photocopiers obviously make copies, meaning they're unable to create originals. So nothing about them ever creates something unique, and they're as uniformed as the rest of the corporate world. That's why the guy cutting through them symbolically shows how the club breaks through the noise. As for the loser, he's the waiter at the restaurant after this. Going to the bus, they ask who they'd fight if they could fight anyone. Tyler says Hemingway, and Fincher's film 7 starred Pitt, and it ended with a quote from Hemingway, so potentially it's a reference to that. Breakdown on the channel now. Now when the pair get on the bus, there's only one ticket bought. It's here that they then look at an advert for Calvin Klein underwear, which Tyler mocks. Throughout the film, whenever he's shirtless, you might also notice he's going commando. This even happens when he's selling soap, which you can see as he stands at the counter. Told you would point out every detail. There's also a bystander that walks past Tyler but bumps into the narrator, hinting at the former not really being there. He asks Sebastian to move, and whereas he touches Tyler, he only says excuse me as he gets to the narrator. We also know from the behind the scenes details that this is who Tyler fights in the next scene. After getting his head smashed in, the narrator goes to the doctors.
Sometimes Tyler spoke for me.
Fell down some stairs.
The narrator then repeats this because the doctor wouldn't acknowledge it if it was just said by Tyler.
Fell down some stairs.
We then see a phone ringing at the house. Above this is a sticker of a smiley face. This foreshadows the attack by Project Mayhem, as they later create a smiling face on a building. On the phone is Marla, and the narrator asks how she found him.
How'd you find me?
You left that forwarding number.
Now, as we know, the pair only gave each other their numbers when Sebastian still had his apartment. So what's likely happened is that Tyler, or rather the narrator, gave her the new one. The reason she calls and says it's to Sebastian is because obviously this would be the person who did it. He ends up leaving the phone off the hook, and we then get a sex scene between her and a mysterious figure. Though we can't show this scene, it uses lots of complex camera work. Several cameras were set up around the bed, with each taking delayed shots. This was also used to make bullet time in The Matrix, and was a really creative technique. The narrator then jolts out of bed in the morning, clearly remembering it, even though it was supposed to be Tyler.
You won't believe this dream I had last night.
The narrator is really confused about why Marla's there, and she doesn't take it too well. On a second watch, obviously we know why she's so abrasive. It's only as she leaves that Tyler comes in, as that would obviously give the game away.
Except for their humping, Tyler and Marla were never in the same room.
We then get Tyler going to see her and watch as she walks to his apartment. On the opposite side of the hall, we see the number 512 and later see her numbers 513. However, the 3 is missing there, which could suggest the third person in this love triangle's missing. You might also notice throughout meeting Marla that Tyler doesn't have any lines. The pair then go at it like rabbits, and the narrator has to occupy himself. Going upstairs, Tyler answers the door, and you might notice he's wearing latex gloves. This was Brad's idea, but it caused some issues at the time. President of production at Fox, Laura Ziskin, said the scene had to be cut. However, at test screenings, it's got a big laugh, and thus she allowed it to remain. However, there was a line in the pillow talk scene that she got her way with. Originally, Marla said, "I want to have your abortion." Ziskin was horrified by this and said it must be changed. Fincher agreed, but said the next version couldn't be cut. So instead, we have Marla saying, "I haven't been effed like that since grade school." Ziskin was even more horrified at this and said the original line should be put back. However, they'd made made a deal so the change stayed in the movie. Now obviously I'm a Brit, so I didn't actually realise how bad this new line was. Helena Bonham Carter was the same, and didn't realise this meant primary school either. After the film released, she was pretty shocked to learn it, and yeah, messed up change, Marla also says.
Talking to?
Shut up.
And we obviously know that the narrator wasn't really there. Cutting to Sebastian writing poems, we can see some names on the side. These were all part of the production team, and it was a little shout out to them. After stealing the fat, Tyler then explains how to make dynamite.
You were then to add sodium nitro, dash the sawdust. You got dynamite.
Cutting back to the call with the officer earlier, he explained that homemade dynamite was used at the apartment.
Have you recently made enemies with anyone who might have access to homemade dynamite?
Now at this point, we get one of the roughest scenes in the movie. That is the chemical burn. Pitt's parents were apparently desperate to see the film, but due to what was in it, he wasn't too keen. So apparently he just showed them this scene, and it convinced them skipping it was for the best. The Now Playing podcast also discussed the deeper meaning behind this. We start with Tyler kissing his hand, which leaves a trace of saliva. However, this actually makes the reaction worse as the chemical reacts to water. Beyond that though, it also highlights the themes of abuse and nurture that are rampant throughout the movie. A kiss is supposed to be affectionate, but it's mixed with this agonizing burn. This is how the Fight Club operates, and though it offers love and acceptance, it has to come through violence. The book further expands upon how the scar also resembles lips. This is on their hand, which they use as a fist in the fight, so it's a kiss mixed with a fist. Again, it plays up the juxtaposition and the themes of abuse and tenderness. You might also notice that as Tyler sweats, the narrator does as well. This further hints that they're one and the same, and the pair also end up with the exact same scar. And the next day, the boss finds his rules for Fight Club and threatens his job. Sebastian says whoever wrote that was clearly dangerous and they might come into work with a gun. He says this is an AR-10 and goes into the full details of that and killing his colleagues. At the test screening, this got a big laugh, but then bad stuff happened. Columbine then went down, and thus the film released in the wake of it happening. Test screenings scored the movie really poorly, and this was all said to be in bad taste. Fincher was then told to remove it, but in the scene he gets a call from Marla. This is pivotal to the next scene, and thus Fincher didn't feel it could be removed. Cutting to her house, we then see her taking the Meals on Wheels for women who are dead, but still getting the service. Marla kisses him at the end of the scene, which doesn't go down well. Obviously, she thinks she's been with him for weeks now, but he rejects her because he isn't aware of it. Heading outside, we also see as he passes by a wall that says, myself, over and over and over again. It's here that Bob then catches him and says he's in Fight Club. He says the creator supposedly only sleeps 1 hour a night, which plays into Sebastian's insomnia. Finding him at the next meeting, it's a far cry from how we saw the pair at the start. Another night is held, and we meet new members of the group including Angel Face. During a monologue, Tyler also says how they were promised to be things like rock stars, and he looks at Angel Face during this. Jared Leto also plays the character, and at the time headlined with 30 Seconds to Mars. Lou then comes down and says,
Sherman's at home with a broken collarbone.
This is obviously an injury from Fight Club, and now Lou stepped in. In what's another clue about Tyler, we see him get punched in the stomach. As this impact happens, the narrator winces, showing that he took the blow. Going psycho on Lou, he lets him use the basement. Tyler then tells them for homework they have to start a fight with a stranger. In a montage of this, we see a priest sprayed with a hose. This priest later pops up in the club, which shows how the group's infiltrated the church. Sebastian then talks to his boss, and he says he knows a lot of things about the company, and that if he's kept on the payroll, he'll not expose anything. His boss tells him he's fired, and then he wails on himself, which gives us another clue. No!
For some reason, I thought of my first fight with Tyler.
Obviously, that was just him beating himself up, and he's very much restaging that here. We then get a top-down view of the books and can see the one sticking out has a cover that says Anger Kills. In the work, the narrator, or rather Tyler, also ends up killing his boss. There the book hammers home he's not a good guy, whereas here, I can see how some people might align and support his worldview. Either way, Fight Club is now corporate sponsored, and new assignments are set. This is when Project Mayhem begins, and we see his two figures use golf clubs on the roof. This is a callback to earlier in the movie when Tyler and Sebastian did the same thing outside the house. We then see Tyler and the narrator hitting bats off of cars. Shoutouts to IMDb Trivia for pointing out that though Tyler's bat impacts the car first, it's only when the narrator hits it that it sets the alarm off. Happens very quick, so you have to slow it down, but it's a really cool detail. Now we then see as they go to a Volkswagen Beetle. It's a pretty famous story around the movie, but just in case you don't know, the pair insisted that one had to be in the scene. On the commentary, they explained how it was a symbol of the 60s, which represented youth and freedom. However, those people had grown up and were now the corporate bosses of the 90s. They'd now repackaged it and sold it to a new generation, but it's completely void of meaning. The quote off the back of it is, "It's a perfect example of the baby boomer generation marketing its youth culture to us, as if our happiness is going to come by buying the symbol of their youth movement, even with the little flower holder and the plastic molding. It's appalling to me. I hate it." Obviously, these days, we live in a time of nostalgia where we just get the same thing over and over and over, with the 80s and 90s stuff getting sold back to us. So I do think it's still relevant and a really great bit of social commentary. Pitt has said, though, that he likes the new Beetle. You betrayed us. The pranks then escalate more and more, and we also see the dark side in Tyler. Going to his shop, he puts a gun to the staff member's head. In the lead up to this, though, we see as Tyler takes a gun from the narrator's backpack.
Hey, what are we doing?
Run around.
What are we doing?
Homework assignment.
What kind of homework assignment?
Human sacrifice.
The narrator is genuinely shocked Tyler's got one. However, this is in his backpack, which indicates that he put it there in the first place. Talking to a worker, we learn he's called Raymond. Though Tyler asks him a question, it's only when the narrator shouts at him that he answers.
The question, Raymond, was what did you want to be?
Answering, Raymond. Jesus.
Guy looks confused, and yeah, it's clearly indicating he was never really there. We then get one of my favourite shots in the movie. Zooming in on Tyler as he says you're not your possessions, the film literally shakes out the frame. It really hammers home how this movie has a message, and one that you should take home after it. I think we all hit a point in our life at some point where we feel like we're trapped. I remember turning 30 and just being like, I'm stuck in a low paying job, bills for everything, and no real escape. I thought back to films like this and decided to just take a chance on YouTube. Obviously I was lucky, but I was at an age where I still had a long time in front of me where I could work at things. However, if it didn't work out, I wasn't too old where I couldn't go back to my previous sort of jobs. So I took a risk, and I know a lot of other people do it, and I think that's why people resonate with this film so much. We've all kind of hit a point at some point in our life where we all just want to burn everything down and then start again. At some point anyway. You can't rebuild without revolution, and yeah, I love how this sums it up. Either way, we then get Marla and the narrator talking, and another clue with Tyler.
It's totally different with us. We're us?
The narrator saying us there is referring to Tyler, but Marla has no idea what he's talking about. This is then reflecting in the banging that we hear coming from the basement.
Sorry, do you hear this?
Hear what?
You're not hearing all that noise? Just hold on a second.
Down there is Tyler, but Marla doesn't acknowledge it or know who he's talking to. Tyler then tells him what to say, which he repeats.
Leave me alone.
This conversation.
This conversation
is over.
Is over.
We then learn that Tyler started recruiting people to come live in the house. The applicant has to wait on the doorstep for 3 days though. All the time they're berated by the figures who keep telling them to leave. Also, fans of From, you might recognise this as being the guy who plays Jim. Message Star Kenny about it, you know the guy, and hey, small world. The narrator then lets out his darker side as well and starts becoming violent.
Sooner or later, we all became what Tyler wanted us to be.
The narrator is letting the Tyler side of his personality become more apparent here, so this line comes with an extra meaning. Eventually, Bob arrives as well. He goes when Tyler initially rejects him, but the narrator tells him to come back. So even though Tyler's an abstract personality, the better side of him still has a hand in getting him killed. Yay! The applicants then shave their heads. This removes their individuality, and Tyler refers to them as space monkeys. The monkeys who tested space travel often died, but it was seen as being something that would help humanity. Tyler sees them in the same way, and they could die for the greater good. They don't have identities anymore, and all wear the same clothes and look the same.
We're not a beautiful or unique snowflake.
Snowflake's a term that we hear a lot these days, with the snowflake generation being one that's easily offended. This term is actually credited to Pollock, with this film being thought to have popularized the term. Getting off the bus, we also see the driver nod at Sebastian, and you might notice the bruising and swelling on his face. Such a subtle way to show how the mind state is spreading and how they're building up an army. The narrator then goes to the kitchen, and there's two subtle details here. Firstly, Sebastian has a folder with these actually being from Project Mayhem. As Tyler hugs him, you might also notice the green paint on his arms. This is part of Project Mayhem's doing, which we see in the news report. This is at the Parker Morris building, which is what Tyler wanted to destroy in the book. The plan was to have it then land on the National History Museum, as he didn't think the past should be held onto. Now inside, you might also notice that neither Angel Face nor Bob have had to shave their heads. If you're wondering why this is, it's likely because both are who the narrator gives preferential treatment to. The Sebastian side helps and supports Bob, whereas Tyler's favourite is clearly Angel Face. Face. We then get further confusion from the group when the narrator asks what's going on.
What the fuck did you guys do?
Bob makes it seem like it's part of the rules, and in his mind he's just getting tested. Tyler then smirks and walks out, and we're left with the guy on the right. Notice how he doesn't acknowledge Tyler either, and instead just looks back at the news. I did wonder if he had a mohawk as well, as he might be getting special treatment too. He's closer to the kitchen than the rest of the group, and might be more of an insider. We then cut to a speech about ending crime. The guy sitting down chatting to the other is who I believe was at the start of the movie. We had someone at the self-help group, and he looks really similar to this guy. Threatening the police to call off the investigation, Tyler reveals they're everywhere. As they exit, we also see this is going down at the Pressman Hotel. These white tuxes call back to that welcome video and explain how the narrator was so familiar with the layout. Outside, Tyler clearly shows some kinship with Angel Face, and thus the narrator then savagely beats him. Everyone's even more shocked than the usual beatings, and obviously they would have thought the pair were friends. We then get the airport car scene, which as mentioned gives things away massively. The narrator then gets in and crawls across to the passenger side. They then ride out, and we see a sign on the back advising you to recycle your animals. This is a play off the fake PSA signs they'd been spreading, which we saw with the billboard. When riding out, those in the back never acknowledge the conversation in the front until the narrator asks the questions.
Alright, yeah, why wasn't I told about Project Mayhem?
First rule of Project Mayhem is you do not ask questions.
Obviously, they just see him in a car asking questions rather than talking to Tyler. Tyler also says he needs to unlearn what he thinks he knows about life, and also unlearn things between him and Tyler.
What is that supposed to mean?
The narrator believes he's a real person, but soon the narrator will unlearn this information. Also, along with Jim in the back, we also have Holt McAulany, whose name I butchered, but he's gone on to have a pretty big career too. Don't think he watches the videos, but I watch him, I just never learned his name, and I'm sorry. So he's a bit like the narrator in a way. Tyler then crashes the car as a test of faith. Inside, we can see he's the one driving, but they give a little clue that he's not real after the impact. Tyler gets out the passenger side, and then he pulls the narrator out the driver's one. Upon his recovery, it's at this point that Tyler leaves. The narrator says,
"Was I asleep?"
Obviously, we know Tyler operates when the narrator's asleep, and thus he's managed to go out and create chaos. For the next part of the movie though, we follow the narrator as he tracks down what's been going on. Though we don't learn what they're building, we see they're strict about not smoking. Obviously, we learn they're making explosives, and Sebastian, he actually walks past a line of folders which are the addresses of the buildings they're blowing up. Angel Face also has the kiss on his hand, and now it seems like he's in charge. Marla then arrives, but after the narrator says Tyler's gone, she seems hurt and leaves. This to her is another rejection by Sebastian, and therefore it messes her up. Finding used plane tickets and going to the places he's visited, we see there's multiple fight clubs and people aware of who Tyler is.
I wish I could help you, sir.
There's no reason this guy would be addressing him as sir if he hadn't met him before. He also meets a dry cleaner that butchers the explanation. According to IMDb trivia, this is an nod to Apocalypse Now when Captain Willard is being asked about the mission. We also have the narrator asking if he's even slept and if he's Tyler's bad dream or if Tyler's his. The narrator also says,
"I was living in a state of perpetual deja vu."
This is because he's just going to places he'd already been as Tyler. The narrator also says it's like following an invisible man, which gets better every time you watch it. It's in this that he then sees the kitchen staff saying his name was Robert Paulson, and we get a guy with a broken neck. He tells them he was there the week before, and slowly all's revealed. Eventually, Marla confirms the truth, and this is when Tyler appears. That coat looks excellent, and obviously Macklemore took some tips from him. Now, the narrator's casting for this also makes a lot of sense, as Norton has also done something similar in Primal Fear. He could play these vulnerable characters, but he also has a dark side. In these flashes, we start to see things as the narrator acting like Tyler, including a moment where they abseil a building. This was obviously the smiley face, and we can even see the window explode that creates the eye. The narrator then passes out and falls asleep, which is when he rushes out. Tyler is gone, but the receptionist says he needs to pay for the phone calls. As we see from the times, these were made early in the morning, and thus Tyler operated while the narrator slept. Following the phone numbers, he realizes that they're the buildings at the end. However, the security inside are also part of the club, and thus things can go ahead. The narrator then goes with Marla to a restaurant where the waiter tells him everything's free of charge. Marla then asks for some clam chowder, fried chicken, and basically a lot of food, but the narrator says,
"Clean food, please."
that case, sir, may I advise against the lady eating the clam chowder?
No clam chowder, thank you.
Earlier in the movie, we learned Tyler, well, let's say he made his own mayonnaise when he worked at the hotel, so this is what they mean by clean food. Marla then calls him Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Jackass, and this obviously is a jab at how there's two sides to him. Telling her to leave town, he then rushes outside. On the cinema, we can see it's listing the title 7 Years in Tibet, well, 7 Years in Tibet there, which starred Brad Pitt. Fincher and him also made 7, and as I've been saying, it's all connected. Now, if you believe it's all connected, then check out our merch store right below the video. We've got loads of nerdy shirts on there like our It's All Connected one, Alien Chestburster, Sith Happens, and if you're gonna spoil the movie, then Warner Brother. All goes towards helping videos like this get made, and huge thank you if you've picked one up. We then get one of the big questions around the movie. A lot of people wondered how Marla gets grabbed when we see her get on the bus. However, you can see the driver has a black eye, which cements he's part of the group. When she's later dropped off at the 2-hour 10 mark, we can see this is the same bus that she boarded. Telling the police what's going on, we see as most of the officers are actually in on it too. Saying they're gonna cut his balls off, it becomes such a tense scene. The worst thing is that Tyler told him the narrator would tell them to stop, but even in that, they still had to do it. It's in this he gets the gun and then has to go to the building with his pants off. Meaning Tyler, we hear how he's emptied out the building, so they're just destroying the records. In the book, he wasn't too bothered about human casualties though, and again they played up his villainy. It's difficult to be like, oh no, the bad guy. He wants to wipe out credit card debt. He's so evil, we must stop him. The pair then duke it out, and Tyler of course wins. Taking him upstairs, Tyler then asks if he has anything he wants to say, and he says,
I can't think of anything.
When we rejoin the scene, we get this moment where Tyler asks the same thing and he says,
I still can't think of anything.
Which is a change of the line with him adding in the word still, which makes Tyler say,
Flashback humor.
I've butchered how I explained that, but that's how it works. It's two different lines, but slightly changed. Now, the reason I see him as finally getting rid of Tyler is because he makes an active choice. In pulling the trigger, it's showing how serious he is. He is actually willing to make a move that could potentially kill him, and thus Tyler's vanquished. It's like if you do something that makes you stand up to your fear, you're no longer afraid of that thing. If he shows he's in control of Tyler, then he can control whether Tyler's there or not. That's at least how I take it. Obviously, it's hotly debated, and I know some people even think he killed the part of the brain Tyler lives in. The narrator's wound is just in his face though, so yeah, that's why I started thinking of other examples. Either way, just before doing it, the narrator says,
I want you to really listen to me.
This calls back to Marla, who earlier in the movie said when people think you're dying, they really listen to you. So you could see the narrator thinking he's really gonna die here, and this is why Tyler's killed. His acolytes then discover him, and he and Marla watch the destruction. Holding hands, this forms a heart shape and one of the most iconic shots in cinema history. To the Pixies, we watch the explosions begin, and that closes out Fight Club.
You met me at a very strange time in my life.
Now, one of the buildings collapsing is also the Fox Plaza, which the company also used for Nakatomi Plaza and Die Hard. The other ones are digitally added to the shot, with them also being based off Fox-owned properties. Obviously, it's easier for them to co-sign one of their buildings being destroyed in one of their movies, and that's why they were picked. It closes out one of the greatest films ever made, and what I think I would class as Fincher's best film. Though 7 is brilliant as well, I think the humour just elevates this. For me anyway. That is of course up for debate, but the films had a massive impact. Leonardo DiCaprio called it the Citizen Kane of his generation. It's something we're still talking about all these years later, and when watching it, it felt like it was filmed yesterday. It's the same feeling I had with 7, and though they definitely have a feeling of the period they're in, they don't feel dated. The style is there in abundance, and the acting, editing, and vibes are all perfect. It's a film that still feels relevant today, and its counterculture message still has a lot going on. It's something I've related to a lot, and I definitely have felt like I was part of that 9-to-5 living for the weekend thing that the movie deconstructs. Think it's all about taking a stand and breaking free from constraints, but also the dangers that can come from doing that. So it's a complex film, and I hope you've enjoyed us going back through it. This video is 5 times longer than our previous breakdown, and though I found so much, I still know there's a lot that I'll have missed. Please drop whatever I did miss below and also hit the thumbs up. And if you want to support the channel as a member of the Spoiler Society, then please click the join button. Did you know channel members get early access to videos like this every week? You get them a week early at least, and it goes such a long way towards helping us out. You want a 2-hour Return of the King breakdown early? We got it for you. Again, we also have our merch store right below the video, and if you want something else to watch, then check out our 7 breakdown right now. It's on screen. It's one of the best videos we've done on the channel, and huge thank you to everyone who's already watched it. Why don't you go watch it again, see how good it was. Without the way, thank you for clicking this video. I've been your host Paul. You've been the best. I'll see you next time. Take care. Peace.